to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, founder of the Eating at a Meeting podcast and Thrive Meetings and Events. Debbie and I were so enthralled in our conversation before the show that I forgot to hit live. So welcome to the show and welcome to another episode. Yesterday, I think 108th episode published on the podcast platforms. So wherever you listen to the show after the live version, go in and check it out. We've got 108 episodes of some really great people in food and beverage. So I hope you can check that out and listen in. But on today's show, I'm excited to welcome Debbie Bruce from the Canadian Anaphylaxis Initiative, and she is from Canada. So I'm excited to have somebody on the northern side of the United States, talking to us about what their initiatives are in another country and how they're managing food allergies and anaphylaxis in that country. Debbie is a founding member of the organization and has dedicated the past 30 plus years collaborating with community leaders, businesses, all levels of government, and advocacy groups to draw attention to anaphylaxis issues and to improve the everyday lives and safety and inclusion of individuals who have life-threatening food allergies. And in Canada, that's 3 million people. And unless that's changed, Debbie, is that number still at 3 million?
No, it's 7.5% of the population.
Okay.
So that 3 million number does change as the population goes. It's exactly the same in the US, 32 million, which is 7.5% of the population. So that's an average of 1 in 13 people have at least one food allergy.
Wow. So 1 in every 13 people have a food allergy. And I know you put a statistic somewhere else. I think it was on one of my posts or something that I read. But if you take it below the age of 40, does that statistic rise?
It does, because the first wave of this food allergy epidemic started in the early 80s. And between the years 1997 and 2010, the prevalence quadrupled.
Wow.
So people will often say, you hear people say all the time, well, there weren't food allergies when I was growing up, when there weren't. There may be, I won't say there weren't any, but nothing like what we began to see in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
So,
and people are like, well, why is the prevalence? What's going on? And I know from Dr. Ruchi Gupta, that there really isn't, there's a lot of hypotheses around it. And living in an antibacterial society and HEPA filters and pesticides on our foods, a variety of different things. Is that right?
Yeah, they really don't know. I spent 4 years on a research steering committee with all the major researchers across Canada, and we talked about this all the time. And so they've got it down to, they think, of course, it's partially environmental, partially genetic, and partially immune, but they don't truly know the trigger. And it's actually the same with all the autoimmune disorders are increasing at the same level.
Wow.
So we don't know a cause, and we really do need to spend more money and time researching why, so that we can stop it.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to stop it. So in some of our previous conversations, I want people to understand a little bit more about having worked with all those community groups. I mean, you worked on a bill, and I hope I'm getting this right, the Anaphylaxis Motion 230?
Yes.
And basically tell everybody what that is.
That was a motion where our federal government recognized that anaphylaxis is a serious medical condition, life-threatening medical condition affecting 3 million Canadians now, a large group of the population, and that there was more that needed to be done, safe and included.
Okay.
Things like national awareness programs, improved labeling on our products because we rely on accurate labeling, improved safety measures on airlines because at 35,000 feet, you're pretty vulnerable, and simple things you can do to reduce the risk while in the air.
Right.
More money on research and things like that.
Okay. So,
and can I just say the reason why we had so it was passed unanimously in the House of Commons, and the reason why we had so much success is because so many of the MPs, our members of Parliament, had a personal experience with anaphylaxis.
Really?
Yeah, we had one member who was the health minister at the time who had a friend who had died from anaphylaxis. My 5 parliamentarians in the Mississauga area all had a personal experience, so there was a great deal of support for it in the House.
Oh, well, that's good. I mean, and I think that when talking about helping make food for people who have food allergies and making the laws, it really does help when somebody has a connection to it. And I think that's with anything, right? Alzheimer's or anything like that. You get more involved when you do have that connection. And because food allergies are a hidden disability or a hidden autoimmune disease it's not an autoimmune disease, but it's a hidden disease that happens by chance, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to share with somebody, oh, really, that doesn't affect you that much, right?
Yes. And how many people have actually seen someone have an anaphylactic reaction, so they don't have an appreciation for how overwhelming it is and how serious it is.
Just a side tangent real quick is like, I was at a holiday party on last weekend, and this gentleman I met was telling stories of how he had saved all 3 of his 3 kids and his wife. I mean, he gave Heimlich maneuvers to 3 of his kids, to 2 of his kids and his wife on separate occasions. And we're like, you've got this shining angel like thing on you. I mean, and he pulled one of his kids out of the ocean from drowning, like while people were just standing there watching. He just grabbed in and pulled him out of the hair. But my point in telling you that is that my friend Jennifer's like, I've never been in a situation where I've seen anyone give the Heimlich maneuver. The fact that he's given it to 3 people in his direct family in a short amount of time is kind of amazing, right? So same thing with food allergies. I'm like, I don't want to see somebody going into anaphylactic shock. So what are the steps that we can do to avoid that? That's our goal, right?
Learn how to use an EpiPen. If we have time, we should maybe do a demo at the end.
Oh, that would be great. I don't have my demo.
I have mine.
Okay, perfect. So there was a story that you had shared with me about your sons. And just so everybody knows, both of your sons have food allergies, right? They're grown.
Yeah.
But he was eating meatballs. Can you share, are you able to share that story?
Yes, he was doing an internship at an advertising agency in downtown Toronto. And he was eating lunch at a restaurant that they'd all been eating lunch at. And of course, you're supposed to ask every time you eat out. And he had asked in the beginning, but there were no peanuts or nuts in anything on the menu. And this one day at lunch, he'd had his lunch and he began to feel unwell and he couldn't figure out why. And he went back to the office and was still feeling not well and phoned the restaurant and said, what was in my food? And they said that they had made the meatballs with peanut butter. And up to this point, he had never actually had peanuts or peanut butter. So he went into an anaphylactic reaction.
Wow. Now, what did it take him a long time to say, hey, to dig down and to determine that peanut butter was used in the meatballs? Or did he just say, I'm allergic to peanuts, and then they disclosed that?
No. Well, he didn't know it was peanuts. He just got that. It's really hard to describe, but if you watch someone who goes into an anaphylactic reaction, they suddenly begin to feel unwell and they go into themselves, and it's kind of like, what the heck is going on? I don't feel well. And then often their throat will start to feel funny and they will start to have trouble breathing. If you have asthma, which 40% of the people with the anaphylaxis do, then it can be more serious and you begin to completely feel unwell. So by that point, what's going on? As soon as you begin to feel that
Right.
Something's not quite right.
So how did he get the restaurant to disclose that they had used peanut butter out of the blue?
He just asked them. And they said, "Oh, well, we had put peanut butter in."
Why?
Why? Like,
I
why?
guess it's a binder instead of an egg. I have no idea, but that's very odd.
It is. It is. Well, chefs like to experiment with different things, but
Right.
this day and age, sadly, you really need to tell your guests.
Right. Disclose. Now, and two of those things, when we were talking about this, two of the things that came out of that story to me is that one, it was a hidden ingredient that was changed, right? And it was not noted. But the other one was PTSD. And you hear that a lot around for military, people in the military coming back from war. But people with food allergies have PTSD?
It's really hard to explain, but when you go into a full anaphylactic reaction, your blood pressures can start to drop. You begin to feel faint. You may lose consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You have trouble breathing. You really are truly fighting for your life. And you go to emerge. If you have anaphylactic allergies, you never have to wait and emerge. You are fast-tracked straight through. Same with asthma. So those are two conditions where they fast-track you through. You are given epinephrine, hopefully before you even left for the hospital.
Right.
Because the longer it takes to get epinephrine, the harder it is to pull you back from a fatal reaction, potentially fatal reaction. So you truly are fighting for your life, and it's very stressful. Okay. And so you go on a course of meds for, a week or two. You feel horrible for several weeks afterwards. And so often you develop fear of eating because you don't want to experience that again.
Okay.
You don't trust people. You're afraid to go out. And at the same time, you don't want to be dramatic. So it's very difficult.
Yeah. Because you don't want to be the drama queen or a Karen or quote unquote a Karen, right? That's come out of COVID, but you don't want to die at the same time.
No.
Right? Yeah.
And there's so many similarities to COVID, actually, because living with anaphylaxis is just like trying to avoid COVID, right? But it's not contagious, but you're always trying to avoid accidental contact.
Right.
So it's very similar.
That's a really good point. Now, we were also talking about this in a couple of different conversations and with what I do in the events industry and looking at it. But what I thought was really poignant from what you said was that it's a collaborative effort. And this is you working with manufacturers as well as working with government, as well as working with schools. Can you explain, how that kind of has worked and what you see as best practices for making safe and inclusive dining experiences?
It gets to be so complicated, and there's many aspects to it. Staying safe. I don't even know where to start with this. But one of the things we've seen is that it helps if you, as an allergic person, when you go into a venue, you should always actually call ahead. Mm-hmm. Because if you just show up at a venue, it's often hard for them to change on the fly and accommodate you safely on the fly.
Right.
So if you can call ahead, that certainly helps. And I like to talk to the chef. Mm-hmm. Because you get a feel for how important it is to them and how they manage it. And often then they'll look for you when you arrive and say, this is what we've done for you. And our server will be happy to look after whatever you need.
Right.
So that would be in a restaurant situation.
Right.
In conference situations, it gets maybe a little more complicated because you're dealing generally with larger groups. Mm-hmm. And so I've watched some of your podcasts, and I know that there's event planners generally take the order to the conference center. And so then the person has to ask themselves, are they going to trust the conference organizer to advocate for what their needs are for this? There's a lot of aspects to it.
Well, and I think it's so true. And it's understanding what can the meeting planner do? What can the diner do? What can the catering team do so that it's a collaborative effort? Right.
Yeah. And I know everyone has so much to deal with now with COVID, but I can't help but think that it's a perfect time to talk about when we build back, how will we address allergies? Because your facilities have never been cleaner.
Right.
So the lack of accidental contact on tables and those kinds of things are the least they've ever been.
Right.
So it's a good time to hesitate and look at your menu and say, we didn't actually do the Anaphylaxis 101, but the 10 most common allergens, and in the US it's 9.
Right.
So should we talk about this now?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so it's peanuts, nuts, milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, soy, wheat. We also talk about sulfates in Canada. In the US, Canada, sesame has been an allergen, one of the top 10 for a while, and the US has actually just recognized it as one of the top 9
Right.
as well. The only allergen we have different is mustard is recognized in Canada, but not in the US.
Okay. And mustard is also recognized in the European Union.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
and actually, sesame is very prevalent in Australia, Israel, and Europe.
The allergen itself.
Yes.
Wow.
Because I think what happens is when you see it used more and more, then you see more and more allergies. So,
right.
And the problem with sesame, again, is it's one of those messy ones where those little seeds drop everywhere. And so the chance for accidental contamination is very high.
Right. Yeah, because it is a tiny seed.
Yeah, so that's one where you look at your business and say, well, can we eliminate sesame? Do we really need it? Is it an important part of especially somewhere where you're feeding a large number of people?
Right.
Because it increases the chance then that you would have an allergic person there. Peanuts and nuts, we tend to pay a lot more attention to, only because 68 to 90% of the fatal and near fatal reactions are to peanuts and nuts. And because they're messy and often you're eating them with your hands, touching things, shaking hands.
True.
It's, and that's where attention to cleanliness is very important.
Yeah, because it's not like you're going to go pick up a sesame seed and eat it, where you're going to pick up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right?
Exactly. And milk, although it's very serious, again, you're not going to pick it up. It can spill. So it's important for businesses to know, okay, we need to clean up spills right away. We need to use a clean cloth. We can't use the same cloth. Those kinds of, but I think the attention to what food are we preparing is something we can all work on together. How can we reduce the risk and maximize the choices? Because in the long run, that increases your revenue.
So let's talk about that. I know and there was a LinkedIn post that I provided, or that I posted a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, actually, talking about it. But at the bottom, it talked about labeling on there, but you had some good statistics on how the market is growing. Can you share some of that? And why is food allergies a profitable market? Not one that you need to take the seriousness of it, but it's also actually an opportunity to really grow your business.
Yeah, because you want to be able to welcome everyone to participate. And I think we haven't really appreciated just how large a market is. And it's also easy to think that it's just children who are affected. But in fact, these people who were diagnosed in the 80s and 90s are now grown and in our workforce and having influence on where conferences are being held, what airline you are using. They're becoming very influential, and it's a large market. One of the stats that I found really interesting is those born between 1982 and 2000 are the fastest growing segment of the workforce.
Wow.
And so one out of every 3 adults.
Well, okay. So what years were those?
1982 to 2000, which is exactly the same time frame that allergens became prevalent.
So 39, like 20 to 39. Yep. They're the bulk of our workforce right now.
Exactly. And so there's a large percentage of them with allergies.
Right.
So they're now an important part of your market.
Right.
And it's not just the allergic person, it's everybody in their entourage that they take with them. Their colleagues, their friends, their family, weddings.
Right. Exactly.
It's not just the allergic person that you're appealing to. So when you multiply that by 2, 3, 4 people who are trying to keep their family safe, it's a big market.
Right. Exactly. And yeah. And if they've got kids and they're depending on what, yeah. And so they're going to eat where they can eat.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's the choice of restaurant is based on that food allergic person's choice, where that person can eat.
Things that people don't think about. One of our airlines has started serving cashews again, which it's like, we're worried about COVID. Do we have to worry about this too? And they're only serving it in business class. And it's like, well, does that mean that people with allergies can't fly in business class? I just don't think they're thinking of the age group and the market.
Right. And it's the fastest growing market. Is that what you said? I want to go back to that again.
Yes. Well, some of the stats you were talking about, I picked up some stats from the US when I was working on a presentation I was doing for food safety.
Uh-huh.
And it said that the market for allergen-free foods could grow at a 9% CAGR. And I'm sorry, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure you do. Between 2020 and 2030. With the global market estimated to reach $31 billion by the end of 2020.
It's a compound annual growth rate.
Thank you. So
Yes.
This number would be a 4% higher growth rate when compared to the overall food and beverage sector. And
Wow.
How do you get that kind of growth rate these days?
Right.
It's too important to ignore. And so let's work together to find ways to address that.
Well, and you think about that not just you've got to think about that in the workplace there, and they're in the workforce already, right? The lower end, the 2020 are coming into the workforce.
The oldest of those are about 40 now.
Right. But so they're eating in your company cafeterias, they're going on events, on business trips and things like that. But they're also staying at hotels. So to me, this is a heads and beds opportunity, right?
Yep.
With restaurants opening up. And what do you have for them in your hotels and convention centers, mostly hotels for heads and beds and conference centers? How can you reach that market, right? What are you providing? And I get frustrated when I go to different venues and maybe the restaurants aren't open, it's closed, and I want to go into the little sundry shop, right? And it's so limited on what is in those options as well.
Yeah, I'll try and buy a chocolate bar.
Right.
There are very few that are safe for predominantly talc peanuts and nuts because it's easier to focus.
Right.
It's very challenging. Luckily, we have a fairly good selection in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of friends in the US. And so I'm always mailing our Laura Secord chocolates to the US. It's costing me a fortune. But they appreciate it so much that it's really nice.
What kind of candy is that?
It's called Laura Secord.
And it's allergen free?
Chocolate, yeah. Well, not all of them.
Okay.
But they do have a plant that's peanut nut free.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the plant, because I know that you've worked with some manufacturers and quality assurance people. And when I talk food allergies and dietary restrictions, I'm like, okay, it's everybody's responsibility, from the diner to the meeting planner to the chef. But you're even further back. I mean, I'm talking to the chef once he's bought the food. You're talking to the people that are making the food. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they can't make the situation safer for us if the food manufacturers aren't making it safer.
Right.
So a few years ago, I became very interested in food safety, in protocol with the manufacturers. And I spent a lot of time investigating and going to conferences and finding out just how major food manufacturers do manage safety in their plants, because they've got all sorts of things that they have to protect against, salmonella and all sorts of bacteria, mm-hmm. as well as allergens. And it's been a very interesting journey. Some manufacturers go to so much effort to ensure peanut nut-free plants, mm-hmm. exist, and they'll go to the extent of they don't have it in their plants. They make sure mm-hmm. their suppliers don't have it as a may container in there as an ingredient.
Right.
They test. But one of the frustrating things that we were finding is we would see an item be labeled peanut free. There would be no nuts listed in the ingredient, but it wouldn't say nut free.
Okay.
So we would talk to these manufacturers and say, like, why? And many of them told us, well, we make it in a peanut nut-free facility where our employees are educated and they don't bring any into the plant. It's easy to test for peanuts because it's one test. Nuts are, pecans, walnuts, cashews, 7 or 8 different tests. But if you don't have it in your plant, and it's not in any of your ingredients and your employees are taking extra care, we never will have it safer than that. So tell us you're making it in a peanut nut-free facility.
Right.
Because then the person, who is sourcing the ingredients for a conference center or a restaurant or myself, know that it's manufactured in a peanut nut facility. So that's as safe as it's going to get for me, and I can buy that product. It opens up a whole new world.
Right. Well, which brings us then to the labeling of that. When you say a manufacturer, it's kind of like a manufacturer's like, we can't guarantee that. It's like a hotel saying that we can't guarantee that it's a nut-free environment or a wheat-free environment. Well, on a hotel side, I completely get that, right? Like, we know, well, as food allergic people, we know we're not going into that kind of facility and it's done there. But a manufacturer, on the other hand, can totally do that.
Yeah, and they're afraid of guaranteeing because accidents happen. But it's the same. We can't guarantee a total risk-free environment for anything, be it salmonella, glass. I mean, there are food recalls. Things get into products, but you've taken every single precaution because no one can afford a food recall.
Right.
So you can be confident in saying that it's safe.
Instead of using the statement may contain or produce in a facility that does, being a lot more specific about it and intentional.
Yes. And it's one thing if you're actually running products on the same line and perhaps you are worried that trace will get into the product, then it's important to let us know that.
Right.
And we appreciate that. And if you are going to all these steps to make the product safer by not having it in your plant and having your employees take special care and your suppliers, your vendors are reliable, tell us.
Right.
Post it on your website and tell us if your child was allergic or if you were allergic, what would you want to know? Give us as much detail as you can. I accidentally stumbled across, I don't know if I should mention company names, but I'm so thrilled with Baskin-Robbins.
Okay.
Because traditionally we can't go into an ice cream store where they're serving ice cream because the chance of cross-contamination is very large.
Okay.
But I went on their website and they list their ingredients in such incredible detail. I'm thinking they do tubs that are pre-manufactured at the factory and sealed and sold in a fridge.
Okay.
At the various stores. And a lot of those don't have any cautions on them.
Okay.
So I thought they label so well. Is it possible they are doing these in another plant? So I reached out to them and they aren't doing them in another plant, but the care they take is incredible. And so you can trust their labeling.
Nice. Well, that reminds me of just a soup that I buy at one grocery store. It's pre-made, but when I always read the labels, and I noticed in one store in one state, it contained ingredients that the other one did not have. I'd never seen it on like 5 other states. And I'm like, but why is it? And it's because it's being cooked, but a commissary kitchen and being shipped to that grocery store for them to finish it off. But I'm like, okay, what? Because you're a chain grocery store around the country, why would you not be making it the same, right? With the same name.
Yeah.
But that's going back to that care and how you're producing it in that specific cafeteria, or not cafeteria, but in that specific manufacturing plant, right?
And there's all sorts of individual stories like that. One of my closest grocery stores was selling pies one time, and there was no may contain on it, but they were pies that were baked in their bakery. So I said to them, shouldn't this have a may contain? You're baking these in your bakery. It should have a may contain. And they said, you're right. So they put stickers on it, but it turns out I could buy that pie from them frozen.
Okay.
And cook it myself, and it was safe for my family.
How? Okay, because it wasn't.
It hadn't been processed in their bake.
And that's a really good point, because like you can have, like a hotel or a restaurant can have gluten-free bread that they're buying from a brand, right? Udi's is coming to mind, right? So they bake in Udi's, they buy the Udi's brand, but then they bring it out into that environment. So it's not a certified gluten-free piece of bread or toast or bagel anymore because it's been brought into that environment. But in the situation that you were in, you were buying that frozen one and it was not brought into the environment.
Yeah. They would go to the freezer and get it for me.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are the little, it may be time consuming, but those are the little things we can do to work together.
Right.
To make this whole situation better. If you're taking all sorts of precautions to eliminate allergens from your manufacturing process, tell us on your website. It's very hard. I used to, because I have the strong packaging background in manufacturing, I'm quite comfortable talking to brand people or quality assurance people about their manufacturing process, but it's very difficult to get through to those people anymore. So tell us on your website. It's a great vehicle.
Right.
And tell us exactly what you do, and then let us assess our risk.
Right. That's the thing, is like, tell us what you do so that we can make the decision. Don't make the decision for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And,
like this Laura Secord company is another one that they're making, not all of them, but the ones that say peanut free are also nut free.
okay.
But it doesn't say nut free or processed in. So people are not sure. So if they're not allergic, they may not buy it.
Right.
If you tell us how you're manufacturing it, you increase your sales.
Really good point. Yep. Because if you're open and you think about all the different markets that you can hit with that by sharing, and you've got 11 allergens in Canada, and we've got 9 here, noting those, being aware of what those are, and sharing the information about those specific ones, you could actually grow that market even more.
Exactly, which maybe brings us to food trends, because they often strike a little bit of fear into my heart.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, right now, the latest trend is plant-based.
Yep.
And plant-based generally includes protein or pea protein concentrate.
Right.
So pea is not one of the top allergens. However, it is a legume, which is in the peanut family. And what we're finding is there are some people who are allergic, obviously, to peas, but what we're finding is more people are reacting because of the high concentration of the pea protein.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we still don't know just how much of that, but I know some fast food, I know a particular common popular fast food chain that's adding protein to all their buns and everything.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I always like to keep it simple. They're adding it in so that they can say that it's plant-based, which is a positive thing, I understand, for a lot of people, but you're reducing your market by doing that, possibly. So be aware.
Well, and that reminds me of lupin, which is a top allergen in the EU.
Yes.
And it is another legume. And it is being used, its flour is being used in a lot of gluten-free pastries and other things. And there's a major gluten-free bread food maker that I think they're based in the UK or in the EU, but my mom brought it home, and I actually want to do a post on this, but it says may contain lupin. And lupin, because it's a legume, people with peanut allergies are actually having reactions to that as well, because it's being used so much and it's very closely tied. And the FDA actually put a warning out for lupin. They're not claiming it as a top allergen yet, but they are actually noting it as being aware.
We saw that a few years ago to red pepper. People who are allergic to cashews often react to, I believe it's red pepper. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So manufacturers talk to people. before you maybe institute one of these new fads, trends.
Right. Well, the other thing with plant-based too, besides the pea protein, is that a lot of things are made with just peanuts and nuts, or they're made with soy because it's a high protein concentrate as well. And so you do have to be cognizant. Like there's a manufacturer that I know, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to use plant-based meats. And they had a barbecue, they had a meat one and they had a chicken one. Well, the chicken one contained gluten. And
exactly.
And so, yeah, you're being great here, but you didn't have any other options for anybody that was gluten-free. So,
and so many people won't even think to check a food like that.
Right. Exactly. Because we assume that it is, because I think people assume because it's plant-based, so it's not going to have any allergens, it's going to be fine, but it's not necessarily. So you've got the pea proteins, you've got soy, you've got peanuts, pea protein from peas, and then peanuts. So yeah.
And so when you're working on your recipes and your formulations, it might be a good idea to ask yourself, do we really need this egg or milk wash on this pie or pastry or whatever? Is it that important to the outcome of the product?
Right.
Because again, you're putting people at risk.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, does it really enhance it, or is it just nice to have?
Exactly. Is it important? Yes. And
I found that FDA warning. So this was from About Lupin. So I'm going to share that, but I just think it's so interesting. Okay. So what other, to help start us wrap it up, because we've been talking about this for 40 minutes. Yay.
Oh, no.
I know. What other barriers do you think, or what other barriers can a meeting planner or a manufacturer or somebody, one or two more barriers that you think that we could use to help open up this market for us to actually have to grow the business?
I think we need to find a way to work together.
Okay.
To reduce the risk. And I don't want people to be thinking that we expect things to be risk-free.
Okay.
I think that's really important. We need to work together to reduce the risk, to maximize the number of people that can consume our food. And ultimately that increases your profit.
Mm-hmm. You've given us a lot of really good advice and things that we can pick out. And like, it's being transparent about your food and beverage. It's, I think, thinking about talking to the quality assurance people and talking to the servers, talking to everybody involved in that food process, whether you're a manufacturer or a, food service provider, to see what experience are we missing something? And I'm thinking, because you don't have a food allergy, or because you're not, talk to somebody who does, right?
And all you have to do, and you and I talked about it, all you have to do is start talking about it.
Right.
And everyone around you has a story and wants to talk to you about it.
Yes.
So I think the important thing is, don't underestimate the size of the market, and don't underestimate the importance of the market. And how can we work together? Because it is a little tricky sometimes. How can we work together to keep all of our guests safe and included?
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this just before the holidays. Before we end, I always have to ask this question. So what is your favorite food and beverage? And especially since we're on the holidays, do you have a favorite holiday food and beverage?
I'm a foodie, so I love food. But cabbage rolls and pierogies remind me of my Christmases growing up with my family, because my mom always made those.
Okay.
I'm not as good at making them as she was, but I love butter tarts any time of the year. And I have to make them because there aren't too many bakeries where we can shop that are peanut nut free. And so I do a lot of baking at Christmas for my family so that they can have these special treats they don't usually get to have.
Well, that's so good. Yummy. So yummy. Well, and actually my mom is making cookies today, and she does the pecan balls. I mean, it's crystal sugar. I don't do those. And pecans. You don't do those. But I'm like, can you make them gluten-free? And I'm like, oh, well, maybe if you make them gluten-free, if you don't make them gluten-free, then I can't eat them, which is a good thing for my belly. Right. So, but thinking about how you can alter different things is really important, and doing home baking is really important too. So, well, thank you so much for what you do, what you've been doing for the last 30 plus years.
Actually, something we didn't talk about is loyalty. and
Oh, yeah.
how we really support those who go that extra mile to ensure those we love are safe and included.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to tell the CN Tower story, but there are restaurants who've gone above and beyond, and we tell all of our friends. And we have people who travel in for the Toronto Blue Jays have a peanut nut-free section. We try and organize games in May where the Blue Jays are in town because May is Food Allergy Awareness Month.
Yep.
So there's people coming into town, and it's always, where do we stay? Where do we eat? Where can we want to go here? Is it safe?
Right.
So we share all the time, and we drag all of our friends, not just our family. Our Toronto Argonauts had to go to a sushi restaurant that was nearby because it was peanut nut free, and we didn't want them closing down. So the whole team had to go.
Well, we need to make sure that we're sharing those and making those comments on like the Yelps and the Yahoos of the world as well. And Find Me Gluten-Free as well as Allergy Eats, right? Posting those, especially the non-chain ones.
Yeah, because we often forget to say thank you. We're so busy trying to find out, is it safe? Can we eat here? And getting angry at people that aren't cooperating. We often forget to say thank you. So I try and remember thank you to everyone who goes above and beyond. There was actually a hotel in Hawaii. I called them and said, we're thinking of coming. And they said, come, we'll look after you. And by the way, don't eat at any of the excursions you go to. Come see us. We'll pack you a picnic lunch.
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It's just that communication and not being angry about it. Being, hey, I'm coming. I want to enjoy my time at your venue, whatever, restaurant. Can I eat here?
Yeah. How do we do this safely?
Yes. How can I eat at your restaurant safely? Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. Debbie Bruce with the Canadian Anaphylaxis Initiative, and working to make sure that individuals in Canada and anyone who comes to Canada actually has a safe and inclusive dining experience. So until next time, stay safe and eat well. We've got 2 more weeks in this year in 2021, and let's see what's going to happen in those 2 weeks. So I can't wait till 2022. And please let me know, who do you want me to talk to? Who do you want me to interview about safe and inclusive and sustainable food and beverage in the year 2022? Until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.